The Last of Us has a lot of heavy themes. We do use humor from time to time because humor, I think, is the most human response to tragedy and struggle. So Ellie is usually the person who's being funny, and I think my favorite funny moment of hers is when she pretends to be infected in front of Joel. And Tess says, don't. And she goes, sorry.
I'm Yvonne Villarreal with the LA Times. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Hello. And only one hello.
What a great table. And we're off. Good luck.
Is it nice?
Dude, that was beautiful. You started off.
I know you guys have gotten around to talking, but I want to start with somewhat of an icebreaker, which is, can you share with me your most embarrassing moments in a pitch meeting? Bill, you've been around the block. Tell me.
Bill, you're really old.
No.
This is a true story. Scrubs is a very personal show. It's about a buddy of mine named JD, who's a real cardiologist and a heart surgeon here in LA still. We went to school together, we're best friends. And I was pitching that show, and in his defense, the president of the network at the time he'd taken a red eye back. But he was sitting where you are, but he had one of those chairs with the little kind of armchairs. I couldn't see his face. I could kind of see his profile. And I was right into the Dr. Cox part, and I literally heard, he was snoozing, and there's a pause, and I went, how's the pitch going? And by the way, we did the equivalent of leaving that pitch like,
Really?
Wow. So the real answer of why Scrubs was not on ABC is...
You're boring.
They fell asleep during the pitch. That was rough.
Oh.
Anyone else have some horror stories or funny stories?
And then another thing.
I did pitch once. It was I think it was for it was a rewrite on a comedy movie, and so I went in to pitch the producer, and it was going really well. And it was only like maybe a 10-minute pitch, and about 5 minutes in, his assistant comes in, interrupts, which rarely happens, and she looks terrible. Like she looks, and she says, sorry, can I just borrow you for 1 second? And he's like, yeah. And this is like in a weird glass room, so I can see the two of them walk away, and then about 10 seconds, and then he just goes running, running. And he's like, I'm so sorry, we'll have to reschedule. And he's gone. And I'm like, what the, are we allowed to curse?
Yeah.
What? So I'm like, and the assistant is now in tears. And she's like, you could validate your parking over there. And I'm like, okay. And I'm validating the parking. And then she comes back and she goes, sorry, don't leave, he's coming back. And I'm like, no. No, he's coming back. And he comes back, he's out of breath, he's sweating, he goes, sorry, so sorry. So we thought that our newborn baby was kidnapped. But
What?
but it turns out that he was just in the other room. And I was like, okay. And he's like, okay, continue. No! And he had obviously been crying,
Sure.
and he's shaking from adrenaline, made me continue my funny pitch.
Oh my.
You can slide that right into the second half of the pitch, though, yeah.
Did you sell it?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how good I am.
I love it.
Wow.
The pitch for Only Murders was with Steve Martin after he'd taken a flight from Australia. He'd just gotten off of that 14-hour flight,
Okay.
and there was no prep with him before the pitch, and so I had an hour with him to go over, this is what we're going to do and this is what you do. And of course, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing I'm telling Steve Martin what he's going to do in a comedy pitch. And I'm thinking this is never going to be anything. And it was my goal throughout the entire time was as he veered over here, wherever he wanted to go, which was delightful, is like hiding my cards, going, okay, we're on number 8 now. We're 2 now. Okay, we're on 2. And trying to balance and find the bridges between that. It was like the greatest roller coaster ride ever. But
I
yeah,
love
that was
that.
a treat.
Well, how about take me back to the early years? Like, what do you remember about the first time you tried to pitch an idea in the room? And Liz, I want to start with you because you got your start at Dawson's Creek. You were an intern, then a writer's assistant.
Yeah.
What do you remember about trying to offer a suggestion in that room?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wrote a freelance for Dawson's. It was a boat race episode. It was, I always say it was after this really, I was always like, did you see this really great Rashomon episode? And people are like, yes. And I'm like, okay, so it was like the boat race one after that. But, so I was an assistant when I got to write a script on that show. So I didn't do a ton of pitching, but when I went on to American Dreams was my first staff job. And I did a lot of enthusiastic staff writer pitching in that room. And actually, Josh Reams, who was a mentor of mine, very kindly pulled me aside and said, if you say something 3 times and nobody has responded, you've got to stop. And I was like, okay. And it was so hard for me to do because I was so resolute in my, mediocre ideas. But I so appreciated him at the time because it's such a hard thing. It'd be so easy to be like, oh, you're the annoying person in the room who keeps pitching the same thing and we can just fire you and kind of be done with you. And it meant so much to me at the time that he bothered to take me aside to say, I really want to help you help yourself and have a long career. Yeah.
How did you find it, Janine? I mean, you were coming as a playwright into the TV space.
It's interesting because I was very, very poor living in New York when I got staffed on my first show. Marty Noxon, shout out to her. I would not be here without her. And I was living in a 330 square foot apartment with a crazy cat. And then I got this job offer to write for, really rich white divorced ladies in LA living their best lives. And I was like, I'm not rich, I'm not white, I've never been to LA.
And it was Bravo's first scripted
It's Bravo's
series.
first scripted series. I was hired as a staff writer and Marty was like, give me your pitches. And so the first thing that I pitched, it was they were like, we need something for the daughter to do that's insane with her friends. And I was like, what are all the insane things that I've done being an idiot running around New York with my friends, doing all of the bad things. And I was like, and then I pitched, oh, well, what if they take tampons and dip it in alcohol and then, put it up their hoo-ha and then they just have a party. And that's what made it. Because I was a dumb ass and did that once. And it was
Did it work?
It was a hit.
Does that work?
Does it work?
It works. It works.
Wow.
I wouldn't. Kids die. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that today.
I'm glad you said a lot of kids watch
I've
this
done
round.
it.
Oh, no, by the way, as long as I can warn my boys about it beforehand, I'm good to go. Yeah.
Demographic for this year's children.
One to grow.
That's a good.
So a lot of The Last of Us is about love, but we present love in both of its strong passions. There's this positive love outwards, and then there's this preservative love that goes inwards. And love is behind both the most beautiful things we do and the ugliest things we do. And I think if there's something that I would want audiences to take away from The Last of Us, it's that empathy is the way out of these situations. And sometimes putting people in a hero or villain box is probably not the best idea. Figuring out and trying to understand each other, even in the face of terrible deeds. That's where I think love can do its best work.
Craig, you once said that Chernobyl, which was your HBO series that focused on the famous 1986 explosion at the Soviet nuclear power plant, you once said that was easily the easiest thing you've written.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious how The Last of Us, which is based on a video game, stacks up against that.
Well, The Last of Us was harder because maybe because it was an adaptation. Sometimes adaptation is harder because there are pre-existing things you have to work around, and you have to figure out, okay, what am I going to do exactly the same? What am I going to change? What am I going to invent?
I'm not going to give you the every day was a wonderful gift from God speech. I've had a lot of bad days. I've had bad days with you, too. But I've had more good days with you than with anyone else. Just give me one more good day.
The Last of Us was also easier than any comedy. Either I suck at comedy, which a number of reviewers, including some in this building, would agree with, or and have said so, or comedy is hard. Because to me, like, when you look at suffering and drama and misery, you can write you can write a drama, but if you keep staring at it long enough, you start writing comedy. That's where the darkness is.
And suffering and misery was in the review.
Yes,
Comedy.
correct.
That's what they wrote.
Correct. If that's what he intended. Yeah, I wasn't always America's darling, my friend.
Well, John, what about you? I mean, Only Murders in the Building is this, whodunit wrapped in a comedy with an all-star cast. You have to sort of think about the arc of characters and also come up with a clever murder mystery and think about comedic beats and tonal shifts. Like, how intimidating has that been for you to take on?
Even that description exhausts me. I'm intimidated by the description.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've screwed myself with this show because it is many challenges, and to writers, it's been like I've watched great comedy writers come in and go, wait a minute, we have to know episode 9 now. We're on episode 2. I'm like, yeah, but that's all gonna go. And so it takes a big plan, and then the intimidation factor of you kind of all have to know you're stepping it up for the talent involved in the show. So it's been amazing that way. It's been gratifying, but it's also it is deceptively difficult in many ways, I will say.
Okay, people. We know what we have to do. We need to go full Ollie Mabel here. What? Ollie Mabel. That's our ship name. All our names put into one.
Where is the Charles in Ollie Mabel?
The Charles is silent. Okay, so what we need to do is break into Bunny's apartment.
What?
What?
It is kind of shocking the way you see the work also then get elevated, because that's what it's been. I just wrapped season 3, and we have Meryl Streep and Paul Rudd joining, and on top of I'm just wrapping it up. It's just right.
Wow.
No, but it is. That's the thing. You sort of challenge yourself when you come upon that, and you're sort of like, how am I going to make that work? And then you see what they do with what you do, and you're like, well, I thought that wasn't going to work until she did it.
Yeah.
She streeped it. Fabulous.
She streeped it.
You just take credit for it, man.
Yeah. Me pure. And I really
Steal other people's stuff, as I said before.
Really important.
It worked with her too.
That,
I told her, I said, no, that wouldn't have happened without me.
Well, John, like you said, you have Meryl Streep. Bill, you have Harrison Ford in Shrinking. I don't think... Describe what the nervousness is when you give them a script, hand over a script, knowing that you're writing for someone of that caliber.
It's been a very interesting ride for me, because the first show I co-created was called Spin City, and Michael J. Fox was an icon for me, and I grew up watching him, and to give him lines he was saying, it freaked me out. Now to be doing it with Harrison Ford is very, very weird. To his credit, he's such an inspiring guy, because he's 80 years old. He's doing things now just because he hasn't done them before.
He's 80?
He's 80.
He's
He turned
80.
80.
He's 80.
He turned 80 on set, and immediately made everybody drink tequila. The guy's tried to murder me with alcohol a number of times. He's still living the life of. He's like, can you believe they won't insure me to fly my helicopter anymore? I'm like, I totally and completely believe it.
Yeah.
You gotta be kidding. Well, Jimmy, sorry for always being so hard on you. It's only because I love you. With all my heart. I don't talk like that.
Look, kid, I'm worried about you.
One of the reasons they're so iconic is he's so game to learn. So not only with me, but even with younger writers saying, hey, I haven't done like a TV comedy, tell me if there's, might not listen, but tell me how you would pop the joke. Tell me what you would do. And
Might not listen.
I know. And I'll tell you, but at the end of the day, he's an old school movie star. It was, the last situation I had with him, when everybody here will feel empathy because you think the show's coming to a halt. So I got a call, and they're like, hey, we're not shooting because Harrison has a problem, right? I'm like, oh, no. So I called up. I'm like, I'm like, what's the problem, man? He's like, my character's shaving, and I thought it was at the end of the day, like before I go out to dinner or something. I'm like, nah, it's in the morning before work. And I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, I gotta shave shirtless. And I'm like, all right. Like, that's fine. You'll shoot the scene if you're shirtless? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what do you need? He's like, 10 minutes to do some push-ups. I'm like, all right, man. He's literally just one of the gang, and you just have to watch him with the younger actors and actresses. He's lovely. It's cool, right? And by the way, I think everybody is sighing like that's neat, because one of the greatest gifts, without saying the bad side, that I think everybody here has had a little bit, is when you have an actor and actress that turns out to be, or a creative partner that turns out to be exactly as you'd hope they would be from being a fan forever. It's an absolute gift, and he is 100% that.
That's awesome.
It's very cool. Yeah.
That's very cool.
John, his Han Solo, it's insane.
Exactly. And John, what's your Meryl Streep story?
Well, that's it. Okay, so I had the moment I directed the first 2 episodes of season 3. And so along with that comes, yes.
Have you done it before?
I did the previous first 2 episodes of the previous season.
And you loved it?
And I loved it.
Yes.
Every bit of it. In show running and directing, who cares?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how hard that is.
Just do it. It's fine.
But it was. And then along came with this season, because it was sort of like in the back of my head, way back, sort of going, oh, and you're going to be directing Meryl Streep. So how's that going to be?
Oh, God.
And it was that moment of, there she is on set, and you're sort of like, I don't know how she likes things to be.
Oh my God, it's me. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, it's me. Isn't it?
I realized quickly, and it's the thing you're saying, Bill, it's that she whispered to Marty, she said, just the nerves. And I was like, she's got nerves.
That's cool.
Amazing.
Wow. It was amazing. And then there was one moment where I thought, I have a thing I could actually say.
Oh, God.
No.
Oh, God.
But it's just a thought. It's not like change your performance, but it was just like, come early. I was nervous, and it was that moment where I was like, and she said, no, please, please, please. And I was like, that's my heaven.
That's cool.
It was the greatest. I mean, she was beyond all of what.
But she didn't do it, did she?
No.
Please tell me, Meryl Streep, what you think.
Literally, my stupid note about could you come earlier to think, literally, it was like she made a poem out of it. It was like that kind of thing when you're like, look at what she did with that dumb thing I said.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I think the takeaway for me with Swarm that I hope that audiences have is that they just watch something that they haven't really seen before on TV. There's like a uniqueness to Swarm that I think it feels more of like an event than I think it does like a TV show. It's like we are taking real life rumors and events and true crime stories and kind of putting this like very uniquely drawn Black woman at the center of it. And I think it's, in a way, it's like genre bending in its own way. And I think it's like kind of creating a new form of TV, which I hope people take away.
What would you say is the most crucial quality that a showrunner needs, and how did you sort of come to the realization? Janine, I'm going to start with you because this was your first time, right?
It was, and I came to Atlanta as a fan, and there was like a whole group of writers that were established, and then Donald picked me to be like, let's, make a show together after Atlanta. So, and a lot of those people came and then I was their boss. Mm-hmm. So that's
a freaky dynamic.
It was a really interesting dynamic, and we're all like, we're all family, we're all very close, but I think it was just like a lesson in like understanding that, a lesson in kind of patience and humanity. It was definitely just the learning curve of just being patient with people, because we're all going through a lot. Everyone has a history, everyone has like their own like stuff with each other, and we're all coming to the table to make something that hasn't really been done before. Mm-hmm. And so that was the lesson for me.
And she says, I feel like I know you. Like we've always known each other. And we talk for hours. I get there at 11 a.m. and I don't leave until 4. we're laughing, and they kept on bringing mimosas, and we just laughed and laughed. Now I've been doing her mom's makeup for the past couple months.
What's a note from Donald Glover like?
It's kind of like advice from your therapist. You know, like he's very zen. You know, he's like a gift. I really appreciate him, and I think he's he's really wise. But he's also like someone who, you know, sees the world in a way that, as a director, like as a multi-hyphenate, he sees the world in like a very interesting way, and so. My approach at working with him is always just, I feel like it's like another eye, you know, and it's nice.
There were a lot of things I hoped the audience would take away. I think one was just this idea that, and Catherine has said this many times, that when you kind of scratch the surface of anybody, you see that there's so much more on the inside than what gets presented on the outside. This idea that our own stories have power, and our own stories and retelling our own stories and examining our own stories have the power to help others and heal ourselves. And I thought that was something beautiful. And then we kind of joke that this is like the Call Your Mom show. And I think a big takeaway was, or I think a big thing I wanted audiences to take away was the importance of motherhood and daughterhood and that bond and the complexity of that bond. And I think also what it means to lose somebody and how you don't get over that, but you learn to just metabolize it and live with it and make something of that loss, you know, if you're lucky.
What about you, Ramy? Because you've also taken the director role as well. So wearing different hats, like what have you come to find as a crucial quality you need?
I think it's really important to not worry about stuff that you don't have to worry about at the time that you think you have to worry about it. Like it feels just like worry management. It's just kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna worry about this thing today, because that other thing, I'm gonna worry about it on Friday. So once I like started breaking down my schedule.
I'm stealing worry management.
Worry management is
that's
huge. It's
100%.
huge because once you can kind of do that, then you're able to do all of it. And so I also have the element of being on screen as well.
I remember being in kindergarten, everyone's talking about Santa. I look over at this kid, Ari, and I'm like, dude, we know the truth. You know, we know this is just like a capitalist lie. Like Santa's not, it's not in the texts.
Do you use yourself as we always say, like Jason Sudeikis on Ted Lasso is kind of an answer key, because do the writers ever have you do stuff in the room? Do you know what I mean? Like he'll used to do lines and like, you're like, is this gonna work? And he'll do it. And you're like, yep. You know what I mean? And so it's such a kind of a gift of knowing the test answer.
No, of course. I mean, in our show too, like almost every season I've had relatively a new hour of stand-up. So everyone will come out, watch the stand-up, and then we'll start drawing everything from that and putting it there. Cool. Yeah. So we kind of know how it's gonna go. And I think too, even
Could you do stand-up about one of my shows? Because that'd be really helpful.
I mean, if I hang out with Harrison for a little bit. I already kind of have like 3 minutes on the show. I think I could do just something about
the gift
being,
of being
being in the room.
All right, before we start, Ramy's going to do about an hour on what our season could be.
On what our season could be. Which is based on stuff, from like my therapist. And all that, I went on a hike with my therapist.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Whoa. That's not appropriate, but that's cool.
You know, there's these lines get blurred. Yeah.
Liz, much of your recent work has included the main actors also serving as executive producers. I'm talking about Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington in Little Fires Everywhere, and more recently, Kathryn Hahn in Tiny Beautiful Things. Talk a little bit about that collaboration, what you expected out of working with actors in that capacity, and how has it evolved since those early days?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I grew up in the network television model, and you're on set and you're young and you're so powerless, and the actors are like, we could do this like the good way or like that crappy writer's way. And you're like, I'm that crappy writer, it's just like all so bad. And so I think I grew up kind of seeing actors' notes as like running a gauntlet. Like if you could just like put on a blindfold and like try not to look anybody in the eye and just run real fast, maybe you could get through them and then survive to like live another day. And it was interesting. Little Fires, I mean, for me was a very different experience with Reese and Carrie in particular. I think what they brought to that show in particular, in terms of their own points of view and their own life experience as as mothers, as daughters, and obviously as executive producers, I truly did not feel like the scripts were finished until they had really given their input and put their stamp on it. And I don't mean that in like a bullshit way. I mean it in like a super real way. It just didn't feel complete until they had really dissected the scenes, like almost like putting their own guts on the table about it.
I learned so late, if you get a collaborative actor, actress, or the lead on board beforehand because they're creatively empowered, it's immediately so much better because they believe in what they're doing ahead of time. You know what I mean? It's so
for sure.
That's the ultimate cheat code.
Yeah.
I imagine, I don't mean this in a self-aggrandizing way for you, that there's been times that you've said in the writer's room, this will work because you believe in your head it works.
Yeah.
And then it works.
Yeah, truly. And just being, this is, and even so far to say is, this is just what we're gonna do. You know, like, and I think that there have been times actually where I've had to really kind of, some people don't get exactly what it is, and it's, actually, I don't fully get it, but I know deep down, like, no, but this is what it's gonna be, and being the person who it's like my face has really helped. And then we all figure it out, and then we're like, oh, okay, that's really cool, But I definitely there have been things that I've thought I was really passionate about, but then it really is best idea wins, and then we just don't do them, But I buy myself a little leeway of, no, I'm gonna make everyone think about it at least.
That is back to your question about showrunning. Like, I feel like that is one of the hardest things about showrunning is that you can't look to anybody else to be the holder of gut instinct. Like, you have to be willing to put your gut instinct on the table to kind of say, I believe in this and I just want to do this.
I think the most important thing for me when we were making the show was to create human characters that hadn't been humanized before. So I think what's exciting is that it's its own ecosystem. This is its own weird family that is not really representative. And I think that the only representation we ever talk about is emotional representation. It's not about a certain group. Obviously, it's a dark comedy about a Muslim family, but I think what we love to have people take away is this family is different than your family, for sure. And there are a lot of things that are different, but the emotional representation part is that we also go through a lot of the same things and have a lot of the same debts and a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same, personal things we're trying to overcome. And I think getting to do that in the most complicated, messed up, fun way is what I have a lot of fun doing.
I want to talk about social media, which is something you alluded to earlier. I mean, Twitter in particular, it's been such a crucial and dynamic form of how the fans talk about their favorite TV shows. And I'm curious, like, I know Twitter's future is sort of in flux, but how have you found being able to get that sort of feedback in real time, conducive or not, and how have you used it as a writing tool?
Writing tool.
No, definitely don't use it as writing tool.
I do.
I'll say that.
I do.
Really?
You do. Tell me how. Well, okay. First of all, there's a Reddit thing. It's all the mystery stuff because I was a little bit out of my.
To see if people are ahead of a mystery.
That helps a lot. Like they were puzzling stuff together and being way smarter and giving us way more credit than we ever deserved for like some things we did. Anagrams of characters' names. I'm like, yes, exactly. Mabel means blame.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
So there's a lot of deep diving that happened, and it sort of then you kind of up it. So I always knew that like with a true crime podcast centered thought that you'd have that goal of like winning over the audience that is watching those. So we had to create a mystery. I thought that like we had to step it up for them, and that's challenging. But I think in general that feedback that comes and the way in which they're positing thoughts and the ways in which they're investigating. So that has been helpful.
I mean,
Janine, it's so crucial to you.
I mean, the heart and soul of Swarm is Twitter. I mean, it's the pitch that Donald pitched me for the show was based on a black woman's tweet being like, why do black women always have to be, teachers and lawyers? We can be serial killers too, And so the show itself is based off of like internet rumors, Twitter rumors, conversations. It's really interesting. We never released what the show was about. It was leaked And then Twitter kind of created this narrative that it was about a Beyonce-like figure and someone that was obsessed with them. And so then Twitter just determined that it was a show about like commentary on stan culture, when at the end of the day, it was really about a girl who's a serial killer. You know what I mean? And so
Were you bummed out that the narrative got taken a little, or did you just?
Because but that's how Twitter works. That's how culture works.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of like a social experiment. Like we were like, we're not going to actually tell people what this show is, and then it became a beast, and it became its own narrative of what the show was. And then when people saw the show, some people like ran with it and analyzed it in this like very analytical, intellectual way. And then all these people criticized it, being like, it was supposed to be the show about this, and it's totally about this girl, like just, and the violence. And so that to me is what makes this show so fascinating, you know, because we kind of just like let the internet light itself on fire.
You know, it's interesting when you write characters of how much you base on yourself. We have a really strong writing staff, so I would be lying if I didn't say there's a little bit of every writer on the show and all the characters. And Jason Segel is a writer on the show as well, so you know he's putting some of his own words into his own mouth, which I find entertaining. I will say that the character Derek, played by Ted McGinley, who is married to the character Liz, played by my wife. Here's your Easter egg. He is often saying things to her that I wish I had the courage to say and never will, except in a fictional television show.
With something like The Last of Us, which is based on a video game and people sort of are sort of knowing what's going to come next, what's that challenge for you in terms of when you have someone that's so beloved like Pedro Pascal and knowing that his character would likely die in season 2 if it
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
What?
If you're following...
Sorry, say that again.
I don't mean to do this. Say spoiler ahead of time.
Spoiler.
It's a thing that we do to off the table. Yeah.
But if you're following the narrative, it would likely happen. But he's you know, so beloved.
I just want to be. Let me just go on record again.
He dies?
We don't
go by that.
We don't talk in any kind of certainties or absolutes.
What episode does he die in? Does he die in the second one?
We do not. He might not. That's the thing. He might not. I will neither confirm nor deny. That's the thing, because we do make changes. And I think what you said is the key. There's emotional spoilers, like there are emotional things. What I think we do, and I think if people who play the game and then watch our series probably saw, is that sometimes the emotional spoiler happens, maybe plot-wise it's the same, but the way it happens is wildly different. So the truth of the matter is I'm not telling you that he is or isn't gonna die, or for that sake, Ellie, or anyone. But you know, we follow our guts and our hearts about what we ought to do.
This is a critical year for writers when it comes to compensation in the age of streaming. You know, top concerns have been residuals in streaming, the rise of mini rooms, shortened seasons. What do you want out of this moment?
I mean, what do you, contractually and stuff?
Yeah.
I think the only thing I was trying to explain this to my dad, to go back to this, about residuals, and this is the real conversation, is TV writing would be in danger of being only for young men and women whose families could support them. And the thing about residuals, I remember I sold spec scripts to The Nanny and Boy Meets World when I was out here, and I could survive off those while trying to be a writer for 2, 3, 4 years by repeats and if that goes away, this will become a business that you can only do it if your parents are well off enough to help pay your rent and to support you while you get to a point that you can support yourself.
And the whole mini room thing, just so people understand, it used to be that a writer would come up with an idea, they would write a pilot, maybe you would shoot the pilot, and then the network would say, we're making a series, at which point you would hire a whole bunch of people to figure out what the season is, and you would all work together. And Now they say, okay, why don't you hire a bunch of people to figure out the season, then we'll tell you if we're going to do it. And if we do it, most of you are fired anyway. And
we're going to pay them WGA scale.
Right, and we're going to pay you nothing.
Right.
And so...
And they'll take it because there's not a lot of gigs.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee.
I actually think, because, you know, I was in Guild, I was on the board, I did a lot of stuff with the Writers Guild, and I remember very distinctly how everything went down in 2007, and this feels different in the sense that I think even the companies understand on a fundamental level that they have f***ed up. They have just demolished. It's almost like someone finally pointed it out to them and said, do you see what you've done?
Yeah.
You've just blown out the foundation of your own house. And now the whole thing's crumbling down around you. They know they have to fix it too.
The bummer is that they're so streamlined, these companies, into corporate entities where I feel like in old times that they were at least inhabited by, if not artist, art lovers, you know, and now I think sometimes the upper echelon are
they've, you know,
corporate.
It's a tough job because you're not just working with Warner Brothers and Disney, and you're also, there's like Apple. Apple has more money than most nations, right? So it is a different thing, and yet they all are together as one thing called the AMPTP, and we're over here as the WGA, and I just think, I always, you know, obviously hope for the best, but the people that I'm, you know, rooting for the most are the people that, you know, like Bill said, need to be able to come up. We need to be able to raise kids up. I didn't have, you know, my parents were public school teachers. I grew up on Staten Island, the Pete Davidson part of Staten Island, not the Colin Jost part of Staten Island. And,
that's my fun.
And, you know, when I came out here, I had nothing. I started calling up temp agencies. You know, I was like 2 weeks away from getting, you know, having to live on the street. And you could still make your way. And that is being eliminated. And I honestly, I think
and
they know
also,
it.
people are not being able to like know what set is like when they sell a show.
Yes.
The mini rooms have
this is huge.
blocked the growth of people. So I had a boss leading a huge production who had never been on set before. And you were just like, that is crazy. You're setting people up for failure. So even with my mini room, which was 14 weeks, I went to Amazon and I was like, listen to me, this is the only all black room you've ever had. I was like, these writers are going to set. So like you can say that like, okay, after 14 weeks, I don't care if like they have to stay with me, which some of them did in Atlanta, which should not have to happen. But like you just make it work because it's just like, I refuse to let this staff, this, you know, story editor who's been in 4 rooms, who's never been on set before, to miss this opportunity.
It's such a good,
it's crazy.
Ramy and I were talking about this because there's understandably so many horror stories about bigger than life people that are awful or sketchy in Hollywood, but almost everybody, I bet even at this table, was mentored in by somebody. And mentorship is such a cool, big thing out here, and with mini rooms and all that stuff, I got taught how to edit, show run, talk to block, to whatever by Gary Goldberg, who passed away, but because I got to be on set the whole time with him going, this is how you do this is how you do this.
Also, how do you know how to write the job? The job is to write for production. How do you know how to write for production if you've never experienced production? So people are getting a third of the job experience and then being told you have to go out and get another job where you only have a third of the experience to do it. Well, it's impossible.
It's also really weird though because this issue has become really talked about as the WGA is getting everything together, and I realized that since I've started making TV shows, and right now I'm working on my 3rd one, but
That's so annoying. What are you, like 27? It's so annoying.
No, but I realized like a lot of what people have been saying, I actually never even experienced because I've been in a position where I'm in it and I'm running it and I go to set, and the idea of like being able to bring the writers to set, I'm like, dude, like I'm fighting for like a higher quality lunch. Like I don't even know what you're talking about. And so I was seeing these issues that people were bringing up, and I'm like, whoa, the industry used to be like that. Like even the whole thing, I've only done streaming. So then it's like the idea of like residuals, and I'm like, whoa, that people used to do that. So I feel like I'm already experiencing what that end of the stick is, right? So I'm hearing you talk about it, and you're like, I'm like, whoa, the only way I've been able to feel like I could, support myself is acting in it and writing in it and directing it and doing every part of it. Every part of it.
Also still going on the road and doing.
And still going on the road, doing stand-up between seasons, and I still, like, I'm trying to get close to Bill. I might need to borrow money, because
Wait.
I might need to.
That's why he showed up?
There are people in this industry who are very rich, who abuse power and abuse mini rooms, and they hire all these writers, and they take all of their outlines and they take all of their work.
All sitting
and
right
then
next
as soon,
the joke's over.
as soon as the contract is done, they take their work and they put their name on it, and those people are erased.
Yes.
And that is a fundamental problem with that.
We have to acknowledge as showrunners, we're in a weird position because we're writers, so we're part of a union. We're also management. There's a pretty good legal argument that we should be kicked out of the union entirely. But as we're in it, we have a responsibility not only to treat the people that work for us well and to take care of them, but we also have a responsibility to acknowledge how many of the us's there are that are terrible. There are a lot of bad showrunners, and when I say bad, I don't mean like they're bad in talent. I mean that they're bad people. They're doing bad things. They're not taking care of the people around them. I don't have a writing staff. I write alone, but I take care of the people around me that are supporting me. I take care of the people that are working on the show. That's just assistants, everybody. That's a big thing. You've got to do it. And to the extent that if I do run a show where there's a room, I'm not doing any of that. None of it. I'm not doing it. There won't be a show. And I think honestly, we underestimate how much power we have at the beginning.
They own it forever, and they get money every month.
Yeah.
And you get money once.
They don't even have to pay for storage.
Yeah, it's like, you know what I mean?
And then you used to get. There's people here. We still. You guys must be of the camp. You still get those checks of like now for like $38 or $420 for something you wrote 1,000 years ago. I still get checks for the One Friends episode I wrote. It keeps coming.
That's amazing.
The one with the candy hearts. What's up? Come on.
The fourth. This is the other reason we're going on strike. To stop this.
Exactly.
This has to stop.
This is.
We can't go on like this, guys.
We're all here because we love TV. I love watching it. I'm so grateful to you all for what you create. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It was such a pleasure.
You killed it.
Thank you.
You did.
Good job.
Thank you.
This is a rough group to... So, some rumors that we're going to have a bigger budget and more infected in season 2. All I can say is that HBO is supporting our show as good as a network could. And we recognize that people really like The Infected. Our job is to always give you just a little less than you want. We'll leave them wanting more.
What is my comfort TV? The Kardashians and the Great British Bake Off, because I just, it just feels like a warm bath.